Hi guys, it's Luetin here, and we're back for another Battlefield 3 Roundtable. And today I'm joined by DCRU Colin, I'm joined by Sergeant Merrell, Daskro, and Jake in the Works Media. So we've got a few topics for you today, a few things going all over the place, and some that are not specific onto Battlefield 3. We've got some that are kind of linked in within the whole genre in general. I think I'm going to go to Merrell first, because I think your topic we can kind of talk around a bit, and it's got a bit of a story.
Wow.
Yeah, it's got a bit of story to it. I'll put you up front today, seeing as this is your first time on it as well. So, do you want to introduce us to your topic a little bit? Now, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a little heads up over it. Basically, what we're talking about is the whole deal with Medal of Honor, and specifically some of the legal elements and how that has all come about. So, Merrell, why don't you start us off with the story? You know it quite well, I think.
Well, first, I mean, you got to look at the basis of Medal of Honor. Did you all know this was founded by Steven Spielberg? He's one of the founding members of Medal of Honor. And when he created the whole series, the basis was to honor the soldier. In an authentic and in a way that the soldier really wouldn't laugh at when they play it themselves. So that's what the basis of Medal of Honor is. It can't deviate from that, because that's what it's supposed to always be about. So this Medal of Honor, Danger Close, I think they wanted to really just jump on the ball, go balls to the wall, and just make this thing as authentic as they could. And they got themselves into a lot of trouble by doing that. And it's a real shame. I'm not sure how much people know about this. And there were a lot of people that were keeping quiet about it, especially myself, knowing that I was in quite a few circles that were let in on what was going on with Medal of Honor. And people were seeing how excited I was getting about the game, but I was nervous to talk about it because I knew that they got SEAL Team 6, or at least a couple members of it. And those SEAL Team 6 is the people responsible for the death of bin Laden. These guys are the real deal. And they got them in on the game, and they're asking them questions and getting answers from them, getting that level of authenticity that no other game has really been able to get before. A lot of these games, they take liberties in the portrayal of the weapons, in the portrayal of the soldiers, in the portrayal of the storyline. They have to. I mean, because a lot of this stuff is sensitive information. And Medal of Honor got into a lot of trouble because they got that sensitive information that they probably shouldn't have gotten, got a bunch of people in trouble. And I do think that Electronic Arts stepped in a big way because they got in trouble with that information. I think the government stepped in, especially now that we know that a lot of these military members are getting letters of reprimands and are getting pay docked for giving them the information that they did.
Yeah.
But I think EA stepped in a big way and retracted a lot of what we see, from the game. And there's a lot that went wrong with Medal of Honor. I'm not going to say that this is the only issue, but I think that the game that we got is nowhere near what Danger Close was working on.
Well, they
I think a
envisioned
lot
it to
got
be.
Well, they also
Exactly.
removed the heads of the studio, didn't they?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
great.
yes.
Greg
Right before.
Goodrich, this journalist was trying to talk crap about Medal of Honor at E3, and he was trying to say, "Oh, you want to be authentic? Well, why do you have health regeneration and all this other stuff?" Basically, he was talking crap about the title. Greg Goodrich met with this guy and did like a 1-hour interview, and it was the most awkward thing. He was like, "So you're talking shit about my game? Let's talk about this." He was like a really passionate head of the studio, and you could tell that this guy genuinely believed in his title. He was very passionate about it and had a lot of respect for the soldiers that he was portraying. And now he's nowhere to be found. In fact, 2 months before the release of the title, he was gone. And that happened around the same time that their partnership program got into trouble that they had with a lot of these weapons.
And I know we were saying a moment ago as well that it sounds, from what we've heard, that they're effectively shutting down the game in terms of forward support, and that it won't be really supported in terms of DLC content further forward from now on. Is that right, guys?
Well, that's
Yeah.
what I read, and I'm not sure. I can't really confirm that anywhere. Like, I did a little bit of like snooping, and I've seen a few like media sites mention that after this DLC, they don't have anything planned. And in their financial report stuff, like where they sit down and they talk about the actual finances of the company, EA was saying they expect a soft final quarter because of the fact that I guess this is Q3, isn't it? Well,
Yeah.
I don't really know what. But anyways, they expect it to be a little bit softer just because they aren't going to be having DLC from Medal of Honor, because they've already gotten money from Battlefield DLC with Premium.
Yeah. Now let me just come in here, guys, and say you might be wondering why we're talking about this within the context of a Battlefield discussion. Now, the reason we are is because it's very interesting that this whole sort of situation has come about. And the thing is that a lot of these details that they seem to have been speaking to people about and so on and so on, I don't know. I mean, I haven't played Medal of Honor, and that's why I want to ask Jake and I want to ask Merrell and, Daskro and you guys who have actually played the game. I mean, Daskro, do you think that some of these technicalities, these things that they've discussed, have really sort of permeated the game in a way that would actually compromise anything? It seems to me that what has happened is kind of gone on behind the scenes, and this sort of research process is where they've actually got into trouble. And that's why it's interesting within the context of Battlefield, because I think any future developer needs to be very wary. And for example, the next Battlefield, they need to be wary about what direction they go in this. And I think that's what the interesting element of the topic is that within the realm of kind of realism of military games, how far do you go with that? And I know within, for example, your job and so forth, that all these kind of legal technicalities, those kind of things and sensitive information could really be an issue there. And I think that is the interesting thing. I mean, Daskro, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's first important to recognize that for better or worse, the U.S. military has a tendency to overclassify, which is to say they tend to make things classified that a layman may find to be a bit absurd, that things are classified the way that they are. So that's one element. But I think there's another element that hasn't been discussed that much, which is you have to understand that each branch of the armed services has a communication wing whose sole purpose is to interact with the entertainment industry in order to create a good reputation for the U.S. Armed Services. And so, as an example, when you look at the first season of JAG, it's completely different in terms of what kind of assets they have and what kinds and where the various scenes are taking place versus the subsequent seasons of JAG. Because first season of JAG, the U.S. Navy didn't support them at all. But the second and subsequent seasons, they did support them after they approved the scripts, went from there. It's the same reason why there's a level of greater authenticity in certain movies relative to other movies, because when you get approval, which is to say that you as a Hollywood producer gives the U.S. military your script and they will edit it based on what they think is the best positive light for the U.S. military, they'll give you exclusive access to certain things. And it may be classified, it may not be classified, but it's up to their judgment. And you also get access to a lot of assets like ships and planes and things like that. And so there's incentives clearly to work with that. And if you look at, who am I thinking of? Is it Jack Kemp? He was the founder of the MPAA. Uh-huh. Actually, Kemp is the last name, but he was one of the biggest advocates for this policy, and it was a very symbiotic relationship with the U.S. military up until very recently. And there's some movies that have gone that route, and some that haven't. And so,
do you think the developers need to be more careful in the future with what they do, or do you think it's more of a case that they should actually, rather than just going out and finding these people to speak to, they should just perhaps get this, they should get approval. They should actually go and say, okay, we want to talk to these people. Is that okay?
I don't think. Let me just say one thing. I don't believe that the U.S. military their comms people are in a position to make those kind of judgment calls for an interactive game like Medal of Honor or whatever game you want to take, because it's not a linear script. The multiplayer experience can be dynamic, and the single player experience can be dynamic in that respect as well. Okay. And what Black Ops has done with Call of Duty series and Treyarch is that they're hiring think tank guys. They hired Peter Singer, who is a heavyweight in the defense think tank world, who wrote a book on unmanned systems, and all of their unmanned systems in Black Ops 2 is based upon the writings of Peter Singer, who is a think tank weasel who gets a lot of insider access to the U.S. military, but is very much a technologist and very much a policy wonk, and so he's sort of writing aspirationally of what could be in the future.
Okay, let me just quickly go to Jake, and then I'll come back to you, Merrell. Jake, you played Medal of Honor quite extensively from what I sort of saw. Do you think that with all this research that they did, so they obviously talked in a huge amount of detail, Did you really feel that came through in the game, or did it really feel like it was just the kind of FPS where they could have found out this stuff without actually doing all these kind of real life interviews and finding all this backstory? What do you think about that? Did it really come through to you as a gamer?
I mean, I think you see more of that in the campaign than you do in like multiplayer.
Yeah.
I haven't played all of the campaign. I've played parts of it. It was a decent campaign, but the problem with like campaigns like that is they completely remove the interactive element of the game. They made it more of like, it was almost like, I've seen a lot of people criticize it for this. It was almost like you were sitting down and doing like an adventure game, like a point and click game at times, because they kind of removed the shooting element. And it seems like they spent so much time focusing on, authenticity in the weapons and like getting everything down to the iron sights right on all the weapons, that you didn't really play a huge factor in the game. What played a huge factor was the story. So I think from a campaign standpoint, it didn't really play through a ton. But I mean, if you go into the multiplayer side of things, I think the optics and stuff like that really do kind of look like the optics that
they're not afraid to use the
actual.
action. That I noticed it's like you got a glimpse of what Medal of Honor could be.
Yeah.
They're not afraid to use the actual names to show where the stuff goes on the weapon. Something that I laughed at when I was playing Black Ops 2 is that you could put a retractable buttstock on the MTAR. Where? Where? You can't do stuff like that. And with Medal of Honor, they had no fear. It's like they had so much knowledge, they had no fear to show you where your attachment's going, but it's like they didn't have enough time to finish it. And it's like content got. You see 3 variants of the same weapon.
I think if you want
as
to
if they
relate
were
it to
meant to be.
Battlefield,
What's that?
I was going to say, if you want to relate that kind of the Battlefield, though, like you look at Battlefield, though, it doesn't really have, the weapons aren't authentic at all. Like a lot of the weapons, they have different names in real life just because they don't want to pony up and pay the copyright stuff. So I guess in that respect, the Medal of Honor did a good job, securing those licenses and giving you more of that feel, because like it's cool to see like the Daniels Defense M4 versus like the M4A1 you see in Battlefield, because like the ACWR, what on earth is the ACWR?
It's the Bushmaster ACR.
And one more point on the military point of things. We have a saying in the military. It's called "hurry up and wait," and that happens all the time. Things take forever in the military. Right? It's taken me 2 years just to get my GI Bill. So, I mean, things take forever in the military, and I can tell you that games really aren't on their list of priorities. So I think why EA probably didn't maybe go through the proper channels, I think that, or not EA, Danger Close probably tried to go in through the back door to get a lot of these guys to get that information, is because they didn't have time to wait. And Electronic Arts is known for hurrying their developers. So I think they went in through the back way. They got into trouble with a lot of the information that they got and the way that they got it. EA had to step in a big way, cut information out. And that's not, like I said, that's not the only thing that went wrong. Their partnership program with these weapons went horribly wrong when the media got a hold of it, because you're crossing some line between, games and promoting real weapons. And I think a lot of developers, especially Battlefield, considering that they're within the same family, really paid attention to that. So I think you're going to see a lot of the stuff that you see with the ACWR in the future, because there is a line that Medal of Honor tried to cross. They got their ass kicked for it. And I bet every other developer is like, well, we're not going to be the first ones to try.
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily a bad
I think
thing.
if anything,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think with Battlefield 4, I mean, you can have all this authenticity, you can do all this research and so on and so on. But when it starts kind of getting into legalities and things like this, I mean, and we've talked before on other videos about how real do you want to get with this stuff. And we talked about if you wanted to have like a realistic sniper game before, that, the player would have to sit in their room for 2 days waiting for the target to appear before they could actually, before they could take that perfect shot and miss. So, it's like, how far do you want to go with it? But
in my opinion, I don't want realism. It's a game, and I want to have fun. I want regenerating health, but I do really appreciate authenticity.
I think, I think, you can make a nod towards it, you see. And this is the thing, when people go, oh, Battlefield's a really realistic game. And it's like, I've talked about this again with discussions with other people recently. And it's like, people always bring up this thing and say, Battlefield, it's the much more real FPS. You're like, really? It's not. It's got a nod towards realism, but it's not really in any sort of shape or form what you could call a realistic sort of game as such.
Jihad jeeping is an effective strategy. Okay.
Yeah, seriously. So
I would do it if I was in the military.
That's why.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, we better move on to the next one. Colin, let's talk about your topic, because I think it's quite an interesting one as well. And so yeah,
talking about longevity in games, and we actually had a bit of a back and forth before we started the session. So there might be even a bit of room for debate on this one. But when it comes to longevity, the way that I've seen things going is studios are cranking out a title a year, or publishers at least. And that's not to say that DICE is putting out a game every year at this point. But with publishers pushing for a title every year, and with the newfangled engines that are not necessarily mod tool friendly, I see the longevity of games becoming less and less. They're going to be kind of like a use them and toss them when the next title comes out. Whereas you go back to previous titles like COD 4 and Battlefield 2, which would have come out years and years ago. They had the mod tools, and those games are still going today. Not as strong, but I don't think that there's going to be as many people playing Battlefield 3. When did BF2 come out? 2007, 5 or something?
Yeah.
I think
so, 7 years later, do you think that there's going to be that many people still playing BF3?
Yeah, it's an interesting
or
one.
COD 4.
I think also as well, when we're talking about longevity, I actually noticed that, we're on a kind of yearly cycle. And also, I think people like picking and choosing their games much more carefully, because they're thinking, right, this game's going to last me a long time. And also, when you look at like the DLC content, like Battlefield 3 is running a year and a half, really, in terms of their sort of overall timescale. They're looking to run it release Battlefield 4 2 years later, but have Battlefield 3 probably sort of nearly right up to that point. So I think that's kind of an interesting one.
I think a lot of the fault lies with Call of Duty, and it's going to keep happening. And just you wait and see. We're going to wait and see what the sales were like for Black Ops 2, but I have a sneaking suspicion that they're going to be just as good, if not better, than last year's Call of Duty. And as that trend continues, you're going to see studios that want to get in on that. I mean, from a concept standpoint, the Call of Duty series hasn't had to progress very much. So they've saved money and time and thought processes on that, and they can just stick to how can we make this more interesting and make it feel a little different than the year before, but still get away with coming up with a new title.
Yeah, but you see, now I've talked about this multiple times, and the thing is like people always bring up this thing of like, oh, they've released a new title, and I'm not talking about Black Ops, I'm talking about games in general. Okay, when they release a sequel to their game before, and people go, oh, what have they changed? They've done this and they've done that. But the point is, how much do people want to change it? Seriously, I mean, if it's a title that they like and they liked what came before, if they change it so drastically that it's not like the game that came before, they're losing what they enjoyed in the first place. And with Battlefield, I actually really like the kind of structure that they've had for it. I think it works really, really well. Karkand was really, really good. The Close Quarters I really enjoyed, because actually the gunplay of Battlefield is really excellent. That sort of mechanic and dynamic of the gunplay in Battlefield is so good. I can play Close Quarters loads and then still go back into some bigger maps. Armored Kill wasn't maybe exactly as popular as it could have been, but I think it's still, they tried something there, and I think that it's good to try things. That's the other thing, is at least they're trying. You look at the DLCs that they've got lined up, and they're trying different things with each one, which I think is really admirable, rather than just sticking with the same old, right, we'll bash out some maps that are all about the same as No Say Canal or whatever like that, and then we've got Aftermath coming up, which again is going to be different, and I think will appeal to a slightly different dynamic of gameplay. But Jake, what do you think about the way these sort of DLCs and within the time scale of play does it appeal to you that a game is going to be there for a year, or would you rather have something that you can crack through in a few months and then move on to something else?
Yeah, I really have mixed opinions on this, to be honest. I mean, it really just depends on the game. I mean, if you look at a game like Assassin's Creed, that's a game where it's like, well, okay, I want to play the next one. I want them to give me more. Just because you want story mode, you want to continue on with that. But I guess in the same respect, though, you've got people who play Call of Duty all the time. And to me, I don't really get too upset that Call of Duty is not the same. I mean, they need to deviate a little bit from the formula, But the idea that the core mechanics are there, the idea of the way Call of Duty plays is still there. I think that appeals to a large number of people, and I mean,
Yeah.
it keeps the game fresh. I don't really see too many downsides because it's not like they're holding you at gunpoint saying you must buy this title. Everybody buys the title year after year, and I mean, you can't blame the developers for continuing to give that sort of offering. I mean, if people enjoy it, if people are going to buy the game, they're going to continue to produce it.
Yeah, of course.
So that's why I don't really understand like the stigmatism that people kind of have towards Call of Duty, as if it's like some sort of like dirty.
I have to
dirty
say,
game.
I have to say, I have got quite tired of that sort of attitude. I find it boring, and I'm like, really, again, every year? Come on, seriously. It's just like, have you got nothing new to say? But Daskro, what do you think about this whole sort of rolling timeline of games?
Well, we're sort of talking about how that Activision is doing this annual Call of Duty model, and have mixed feelings about it. But let me posit a different example. What do we think of the Madden series that EA puts out,
Yeah.
or FIFA?
Yeah, sure.
These
Stop
are-
buying it 6
I'd
years
say
ago.
Madden's the king of this if we're going to use an
I mean-
example.
Yeah, we did actually
I
bring
mean-
this up. We did actually mention this a while back, I think, on a different one that I did this, and we brought up this topic, which is that some games will release every year and they get a lot of flack for it. But even Battlefield, they can say, okay, how much have they changed between the two or whatever, and then you talk about Call of Duty, the same deal. But sports games, they just buy it. People love it. What's the deal there? I don't know.
Yeah, I bring up that example because from a financial perspective, EA makes a lot of money off their sports titles, and they pay a lot of royalties and licenses to use them. But that's well worth it because a franchise like FIFA gives them a lot of sales, and it's something that they can churn out reliably every year because there's an established fan base, especially in the developing markets, and it allows them to repeat it. In fact, I would contend that those titles probably have more longevity than the Call of Duty series will.
And also, let me tell you, right?
Yeah, I agree with
when people complain about
Already have, I think.
Yeah, well, when people complain about COD releasing every year or whatever like this, and it's like, well, how many years has it been? 3 or 4? EA have been putting out sports titles since the Sega Mega Drive probably every year, I remember playing all those sports
Decades.
games. Yeah, it's been a long, long time, and you never hear anything about it. You never hear anyone complain going, oh, here's another one, here's another Tiger Woods, here's another FIFA.
They're under the veil of, you got to add the new players.
Yeah, for sure.
Every team changes every year, so the new game is the representation of the team that year.
Exactly. But why?
Even though that they've added aspects into the game that change as the team plays.
Yeah.
That's, I think, been their excuse.
That's, I think they add little tweaks. But I mean, Merrell, why do you think it is that there's this kind of strange stigmatism with military games where people just can't handle it if the game is sort of vaguely similar to the one that came before? I mean, what do people want? I mean, seriously.
People want something new. And the people that hate Call of Duty,
Or the
they
ones
hate
that
Call
buy it.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're the ones that buy it because all their friends buy it. And I think Call of Duty does a really good job with its advertising, and they make it seem really good every year. And the people that didn't enjoy it the year before, I think they're getting hooked and thinking that they fixed the things that they didn't like. Nothing's getting fixed with Call of Duty, guys. It's the same issues every year. If you don't like Call of Duty, you're not going to like the next one that comes out, no matter what they say in advertising. I think that's the issue. You got people that are really bitter. They're like, oh, man, this Call of Modern Warfare 3. I'm probably going to not get the next Modern Warfare that comes out. I'm not going to fall for it. Just like I'm not going to get Call of Duty Elite again. It's going to be the same shit.
I mean, I didn't pick up the Modern Warfare 3 because I knew it wouldn't be good, and I've talked about this in a different video as well. But I mean, I think it's interesting that, for example, Battlefield and stuff like this, I mean, I know actually saying this, people always point me out in this. COD comes out every year, but they actually, because they're split with the developers or producers, whatever, they are actually running it on a 2-year cycle. So it's not actually every year because they have split between studios, so it is more like Battlefield where they're producing it over a 2-year period, I think. So it's not actually like they crack through. This is something I think people forget very often. A Call of Duty title comes out every year, but the game is produced over a 2-year cycle, so it's a little bit different.
Very true. So we should see a new Bad Company by now, if you ask me.
Well, I think it's very interesting. Let's think about Battlefield here. Okay, Bad Company 1 and Bad Company 2, fairly similar actually in terms of what they achieved in terms of graphics and so on and so on. So they weren't too dissimilar from what you could compare to other titles. They really changed not a significant amount between those two, but the changes that they did make were significant. They really altered the dynamic and the gameplay of the game. If you look at Bad Company 1 and Bad Company 2, which I actually did, I went back onto Bad Company the other day, the original one, and I put some gameplay up on my channel. People were loving it. They really loved it. They specifically loved some of the sort of equipment perks and things. For example, having the mortar strike from the sniper, and obviously that was in Bad Company 2 as well. So people loved some of these bits and pieces from the older games.
Well, I was going to say, like, I think to a certain extent, the attention span of the gaming community this day, in this day and age, has been decreased dramatically from what it was. Like, you know, people have moved on, and then they're reminded of what a great game Bad Company 2 Vietnam was, and it was, you know, Bad Company 2 in general was a great game. I think that when you have games that do change substantially from release to release, and I didn't play a ton of the original Bad Company, but the feel of the game and the playability of Bad Company 2 versus the original Bad Company, I found that there was really a substantial difference there.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you back it up to Battlefield 2. So, like, the last few titles from DICE, from Battlefield 2 to Bad Company, I mean, that was a big jump.
Yeah.
Bad Company to Bad Company 2, there was a big jump. And Bad Company 2 to Battlefield 3. You know, they've made significant advances and changes from release to release. So, you know, say what you will. Even Medal of Honor 2010, it had its issues, you know, felt rushed as far as the flow of the game, but the gameplay and the sound design and that kind of stuff was even a step above what they did with Bad Company, too, I thought. In certain respects. It was not nearly as good of a game, but, you know, they're always moving forward. And I haven't really felt that with the Call of Duty series, and I've kind of given up on it myself.
I think Colin actually brings up a very interesting point here, and it's going back to this development cycles concept and how the Call of Duty has been doing it for the last 4 years. One thing that we have to consider is that Call of Duty has been doing this on the current generation consoles, and that the engine development and the textures development and other things around those lines and optimizing the engine and the game itself around the hardware has really been a non-issue in the last few titles. Whereas they may actually find themselves quite challenged when the next generation of consoles come in, because it's going to require not just a lot of advertising like they're used to, but a tremendous amount of R&D associated with building an optimized engine for those next-gen platforms. And when you look at the most recent 2012 annual report for EA, they call out specifically that there's been a lot of R&D, but a lot of it's going into fourth-generation console development, or the next-generation console development, excuse me. And because of that, to me, that indicates that they are already prepping their next-generation FIFAs and their next-generation Maddens, all for that transition. And it'll be very interesting to see how well or not so well Activision can transition their Call of Duty franchise in that same respect, because it may not work in a 2-year development cycle. It's
a good point to make, and actually it's kind of a bit of a real-world metaphor, is when you think about a business, and I know within certain businesses that I've worked with, when you have, for example, a sort of software structure or whatever for your business, now it's going to be a significant investment to upgrade that, whatever program your company is working on, whether you're a publisher or, you know, design company or whatever. Obviously, new software comes out all the time, and the longer you leave it, in some ways, it can actually be more trouble and more money to leave it and leave it and leave it. I mean, yeah, you might survive, and that stuff that you're working with is adequate for the job that you're doing, but the more time you leave it, it can actually become more of an investment to actually upgrade everything and get everyone back up to speed with what they've got to do.
Well, you know, the Frostbite engine has gotten a following all its own, and a lot of people love the Frostbite engine and don't even realize it. You know, it's why they like Bad Company. It's why they like Battlefield. It's because they love that Frostbite engine and they love the mechanics behind it, the feel of the game, and they don't even realize that that's the reason that they love it. Whereas, you know, Call of Duty, I'd have to see their next-gen engine. You know, they're going to need to put stuff like destructible environments and stuff like that into there.
I have to say that's one big thing that I feel like I've been I feel like I've been spoilt with Battlefield for so long with the destructible environments, and when I go into a game now that does not have that, it feels like a game from the 1990s. It feels like static and dead, and it just feels like it has no life to it. It feels like you're playing in a kind of cardboard construct, and it doesn't feel real. You have no immersion. So you literally, I'll tell you what as well, when I play Battlefield, I get very emotive. I get very much like I'm actually in sort of the game environment, and I'm really sort of feeling everything that's going on around me. I get very sort of vocal about it. I'm like, come on, we got it down, and I get really sort of about it. From the last couple of days when I've been having a go around with COD, no, it just feels to me very different. It's I don't feel that, and I just feel sort of more less involved as such. You feel very involved compared to other players. I should make that distinction. So when you're playing against other people, sure, you'll get some guy come behind and knife you 3 times in a row. That's going to piss you off. But in terms of the actual environment, it doesn't feel so much. But we better move this one on now. Right, let's go to Jake, your topic of the day. And I'm going to take a back seat on this one because it's a PC matter. So I'll let you lead it in, Jake.
The idea I had was kind of like PC optimization, and it seems like Infinity War. I almost called him Infinity War. Treyarch did a really, really good job with this, like their rendition. That seems to be the theme of tonight of Black Ops this go around. And they actually made a good PC title, and it was kind of curious to me because it's like in the past, Call of Duty has just been god awful since like Call of Duty 4. I mean, World at War was decent, but for the most part, they've never really focused on PC development. And we can kind of tie this into Battlefield 3 at some point because it seems like developers are starting to focus more on PC because I think they see that like we're going that direction. They're seeing that even though it may not be the most popular right now, it seems like people are slowly working their way towards that angle. We're always going to have consoles. I think we'll get to the point where we're kind of, in the middle where it's like console and PC games are pretty much the same. I think that's kind of what we're gravitating towards. But
to where they share the same lobby?
Yeah, well, we'll see about that. I don't know. Counter-Strike Go didn't do a very good job with it. But anyways, I kind of got off topic there. But I was just kind of impressed just how good of a job they did when optimizing Black Ops. Have you guys played it on PC?
I have, and I played it on PC and played it on Xbox. And at this point, I don't know if it's because the engine just feels better on the console or if it's just a mental thing for me because I played every Call of Duty on a console. Maybe it's like a mental block. I feel like I have to have a controller in my hands to be good at Call of Duty. But I did play it on PC, and I do think it's tremendously better than what we've seen before. And I think you've seen this trend of more PC gamers because you've seen, the consoles are reaching the end of their lifespan. I mean, period. And a lot of people realized that a long time ago. I mean, when you play Battlefield on a console, and then you play it on the PC, just play it on Ultra on the PC, load it out. The difference is staggering. And I think a lot of people are starting to realize that. You're seeing a big trend in PC gamers, but I think that might start to go away once the next-gen consoles come out.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lower gap between the two, that's for sure. And I'm kind of interested to see, because, I mean, look at Origin. EA's really positioned themselves to move forward with Origin. I mean, it's going to be on the Wii U, and that's kind of a sign of the times, I think. I mean, look at the Twitch integration they actually just released today. I think that just shows you just how much developers are focusing on PC development.
I think whether sort of hardcore gamers, which I think we may classify ourselves as, things we seem to play every single day, but compared to other people within the entire gaming industry, I think it definitely is that they're trying to sort of broaden the spectrum and move towards other people and optimize their games to get the most out of them. It's a curious point as well that you make, Jake, about this idea of are they going to make PC games more in line, because it seems to be the case that obviously, I mean, for years, when a game gets released, it goes multi-platform, but I think more and more they're coming to the conclusion that because, again, we're looking at these big titles every year, so it's very important to them that when they sell these large titles like Battlefield, when that game comes out, they want it to do well on every platform. They don't want to make a game that's like absolutely the best on one system and the others they just port it and it's crap. No matter how cynical people may be and think that is actually the case, I don't believe that that's the case, because I believe that if you were working for that company, you wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want that. If I was working for a company like EA or DICE and I wanted to make a game that was going to release across different systems and across whole different communities, you would want to get a good response, because at the end of the day, that's going to benefit you and your company and your game and your whole reputation. What are you going to say, Daskro?
I was just going to mention that the interesting thing about Origin and the recent acquisition of ESN, which is the application that made Battlelog, is they are shifting a focus towards digital content distribution over traditional brick and mortar stores. And I know for a lot of console guys, you included, it's very traditional for you to go to a brick and mortar store to pick up your game and buy it, pre-order or otherwise, and then put that disc in and play it. For the PC folks, that's not the case and hasn't been the case for a lot of us for years. But in the recent second quarter filings, EA actually talked about the significance of digital distribution, where they were saying they were making 20 to 30% more money, greater margins on digital content. And I'm not talking about DLC. I'm just talking about selling games online versus selling them through brick and mortar stores, because of all that associated costs with the distribution channels and the middlemen and the boxes and this and everything around those lines. And I think what they're coming to find out is, so if they can sell these games online, they don't need to sell 1.5 billion copies when they're making a whole lot better margins than what they're expecting. They can only sell 1 billion copies and still make the same amount of earnings, which in the end, the bottom line does matter. And the second aspect of it is, we talked a little bit about how the Frostbite engine is trying to is sort of being new in vogue with EA, and it's on multiple games now. I think what we'll probably see with ESN is the same concept, where they can peanut butter spread all that development costs associated with essentially a Flash-based front end that's web-based, and position it so it's not only good for PC but for next-gen consoles, which will most certainly have some kind of Flash capability built in. And if they can have all of that user interface stuff that's sort of peripheral to the game itself all done, it reduces their development costs significantly and reduces their cycle times. It's a real big win-win if it ends up working.
Yeah, I bet you game prices won't even go down. Like, that was something I was talking to one of my buddies about the other day. It's like, there's no way they'll pass that sort of savings on to the consumer. Like, that's just going straight into EA's pockets, because I mean, they're struggling, so they're looking for every penny they can milk out of any franchise. I mean, look at Premium.
I think me and Colin did discuss a while. Was it the first one we talked on, Colin? I think when we talked about finances and sort of in the gaming industry at one time, didn't we? And I think we talked about this idea of what would happen if all of a sudden they said, okay, no longer will we put, because we looked at how people's broadband over the world has kind of increased significantly. I think it would be fair to say that, the US and the EU generally have very, very good internet connectivity now, for the most part. I think in some areas of the US, because it's the distances involved are so extreme that it can be a bit tricky. But I think for the most part, people have fairly good connections nowadays. And so, you look at things like on consoles and you look at stuff like Steam and so on, where a lot of people, on, each consoles, they usually have their own inbuilt store, and you can buy games and movies and whatever you want, you can stream it. And so we talked a bit about this idea that what would happen if all of a sudden developers turned around and said, okay, we're not going to put our games back out into store anymore. It's all going to be digital.
Absolutely. I'm not sure how things are in the UK, but when's the last time you guys remember going to a Blockbuster to rent a movie?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't. I cannot. It has to at least be 45 years. And there was no specific day that I stopped going to Blockbuster. It felt natural. I'm like, it's something I didn't want to do. I didn't want to go to Blockbuster to rent a movie because there was a service on my television that let me watch it through my television. Why am I going to get out of my house? So it's going to be something that happens. People aren't even going to think about it because it's 1,000 times more convenient, and it's a lot cheaper for the company. We're going to see it happen, I think, within the next year or two.
I just have hilariously nostalgic memories right now of me being about 10 years old and on a Friday going with my parents to the video store and checking out all the Sega Mega Drive games and like renting.
Did you peek your head in the porn section?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I don't think I don't think a UK video store would have a porn section. I don't think so.
Blockbuster was dirty while I was from there.
No, not over here. We're well cultured. No,
had the beads hanging down that covered it up. You know.
Oh, of course, yeah. This is Colin's area of expertise for sure. You know,
Always.
But no, but I just find it funny. It makes me feel so old now to think about it. Yeah, you know, it was kind of a regular thing as a family that we would go and pick up a video to watch sort of Friday, Saturday or whatever. We'd get a film and come back. But now you wouldn't even think to do it. You never would.
No,
and
people aren't even going to think about it.
Well, even if you wanted to get a film, what can you buy? You can buy a film for a couple of dollars or a couple of pounds now. I mean, you go down to any of the media shops, you can buy good films for sort of £3, which is nothing. You know, it's nothing.
But why is that for consoles right now? Why it's like that because there's an inherent hardware limitation with the current generation of consoles in terms of how much data they can hold. If the next generation consoles have a terabyte of hard drive space or something else around those lines, I think what we'll see is this medium of physical disc to go away, and all the various brick and mortar stores along with it. So this used game market that a lot of the console guys are used to will evaporate. Yeah, and that's
absolutely
good.
Anyway, we can come back to this one, I think, on the after show discussion for whoever's staying around for that. But let's go on to the last topic now, seeing as we're coming into the hour. So my final topic for today is it's about aircraft in Battlefield. And this is kind of my topic of the week. I seem to keep having these topics of the week at the moment. And there's one that I've been sort of talking a few things, people about on Reddit and other people. I'm going to do a couple of other videos probably talking about it as well. But I think it came originally, I think I saw one of Levels videos, and I think it was only like a 1 minute mention. He sort of said something about it, and I thought, oh yeah, that's kind of interesting. And basically what we were thinking of was with the next Battlefield 4, whether aircraft in terms of jets, not helicopters, should actually be taken out of the game. Because when you think of Bad Company and the completely different playstyle that had there, however, I would like to say that I'm quite on the fence with this one. I can kind of see the positives and the negatives. I really can. I just think, and I think Level's point that he made actually on the video itself was he said that you can be in a situation where one extremely good pilot can dominate the entire battlefield by clearing all airspace, all helicopters, and then start engaging targets on the ground. Now, I personally don't, that is a little bit irritating, but I don't necessarily see that as a very bad thing, because at the end of the day, if someone's put in the time and effort to actually become that skilled with an aircraft, I don't see the problem with it. I mean, they are clearly a very good player. They've obviously put in the time, so therefore they're getting the benefits, and the people on the ground are suffering the results. But I still think it's an interesting idea to toy around with the idea of, okay, were we better off without jets? I mean, obviously we see jets are often in that endless cycle, and they're just sort of flying around in the sky. I think from a PC point of view, it's perhaps less an issue, because often you will at least be running 32 players, and therefore the amount of people in the air is not perhaps such a considering factor. But for console, if you have a helicopter, okay, that's 2 people, and then maybe if you were on Conquest Forever, you've got another 2 jets, all right? So that's already a third of your team in the air. And if those 2 pilots are not really doing very much, or they keep getting shot down, that means that you're a third of your team weak on the ground, which can have a significant impact on how successful that gameplay is. I think it just shows again the limitation of consoles, which I'm happy to admit that I play on, but it doesn't change the fact that it's a limitation in terms of certain gameplay aspects of Battlefield, because Battlefield by its nature and the way they've pushed it with Battlefield 3, they have made it more open and the distances involved. So you really do need a few more people to really cover that space. But I also wanted to kind of just bring in another little thing associated with it, which is that if we took out jets, or even if we didn't, are there any other aircraft that you think would be particularly interesting, any specific makes, models, or roles they could play which aren't currently fulfilled that you would like to sort of see brought into the game? Merrell, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, first, I don't think that they should get rid of the jets. I think there's a couple problems with the jet right now. On PC, you're right, there are 32 players, but I want to say 90% of the servers I get into have some type of reduced time on the vehicle respawn. So even if you do get that guy out of the sky that's really good in the jet, 10 seconds later he's back in the sky, and you're just like, well, fuck. I guess I'm going to be doing this the whole round, And so that's a big problem. I'm not sure if that is a problem on the console, but now that you have private servers on the console, I'm sure that it is. People who run.
I don't think we actually have respawn adjustments for vehicles on consoles, so it's not an issue.
Okay, so there you go. But on PC, it is an issue, and also I think it's an issue because a lot of people get into the jet. The jet, I think, requires the most amount of learning. And people get into it, they don't know anything, and they crash it a few times. They get shot out of the sky by the other jets, and they're just like, fuck this. I have no desire to invest time in this. And I think that's their number one problem, because the jet does have a very vital role. And if it goes uncontested, it can tear the other team apart. But there are very simple ways to contest it. And I think the main issue is people just don't know them. And they don't really care to learn them because it's a difficult thing in the beginning, because Battlefield's just like, here you go.
Yeah.
Try your best.
I think that's often the issue, is that people don't actually want to try and get involved and deal with these things. If people, I mean, even trying to lock onto an aircraft can be a frustration for that pilot, because it's just he doesn't know where they're aiming at. Just that feeling of being locked on is, it's an extra thing to think about. I mean, people may say, okay, yeah, if he's a very good pilot, he'll know that he's safe. He knows that he doesn't have to worry about it. But it's still at least people are going down. That's why with the AC-130, I mean, it can be extremely frustrating, but I've demonstrated multiple times in games which I posted on my channel that with just one person, me, locking that AC-130 up, and with a small amount, like 50% help from the jet, it can be just removed with no problem whatsoever. Jake, what's your thoughts about aircraft? Is there anything you would like to see come into the next Battlefield?
What about an Osprey? I've always said that I thought that would be cool.
Yeah.
Different kinds of like transport vehicles. But the thing about it is like transport aircraft have never really been that useful, because other than armored kill, there's not a lot of maps where that's like a big factor. I mean, even in Conquest, the way they kind of laid Conquest out in Battlefield 3, it's kind of become a non-factor in my eyes to get from point A to point B, especially on PC, since like ranked servers really don't mean ranked. I mean, they can have any rules that they want.
Yeah.
And if you can just jump in a buggy every 5 seconds, a lot of people don't ever use the transport helis, and that's kind of going to make me think that they're not going to put many into the next game just because they weren't used very often.
That would frustrate the hell out of me, because I love transport helicopters since the Black Hawk in Bad Company 2, and it was in Battlefield 2 as well. But I mean, it just is such a good tool. I don't know why people don't use these things. Absolutely fantastic. I think it comes down to the fact that people are obsessed with getting kills, and the fact that if you're a good transport heli pilot, you often end up bottom of the scoreboard. To me, that's not an issue. I don't care.
Some people
we'll
just park it up really high in the air, and they'll just like use it as a spawn beacon.
Yeah.
And I've never been a fan of that at all.
I don't mind that, because they're still a bit
I love that.
Really?
there's still a bit of skill involved.
I
there.
gotta say, it's not an effective strategy, but it's pretty damn fun.
You can,
drives
I think it's a
shut
pretty
down.
effective strategy. I got some videos of it being a very effective strategy.
I mean, it's good in certain maps, but like I've had it like where I'm benefiting from it because these guys are raining from the sky,
Yes,
and I'm just sitting there like boop, 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 boop. But some situations, if you get a good transport helicopter pilot, like they can do work. Like especially if they can fly low to the map and you can just jump out onto the ground. I mean, that's some of the most effective transport heli work I've seen, is when you can get a really good pilot who can fly low to the ground.
I think the frustration is that often the transport heli appears in Conquest and more than, for example, Rush. Whereas when you think about Bad Company 2, the transport heli would often, the Blackhawks, the maps that they were on in Rush, they played out very, very well. They were very useful tools in the Rush games on Bad Company 2. But with Battlefield 3, they are on few maps, and again, it's maps like Noshar Canals and Caspian, but again, like Rush, it doesn't appear in the Oman Rush and things like this. So the transport heli really makes a very minor appearance in the games as such, and I think that's a real shame. I think they've done a disservice to it, because it's such a brilliant tactical tool. I really would like to see it appear a bit more. Colin, what's your thoughts about removing jets from the game? Do you think that they should be removed? Would you like to see some tweaks? And is there any other, any other aircraft you'd like to see in the game?
I'm fine with jets. I'm on the same page where if you invest the time to get your skill level up where you can be dominant with a jet, then good on you. You know, you don't bitch about it. Take that time that you've spent complaining about it and hop in an empty server in a jet and learn how to fly one. You know, it's and I think that they put it in there as you know, as something to appeal to people that had been missing jets since Battlefield 2. I don't think that they're realistic. Obviously, you know, given the size of the maps, you know, the jets aren't going to be able to hover around that map. But
considering that they kill infantry so easily.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's funny.
You know,
Yeah.
it's you know, it's to add to the fun factor of the game, and I think that that's fine. Like I'm not by any means opposed to them putting things into the game to kind of add to the fun, as long as it doesn't overwhelmingly add to the frustration. And especially on PC, I think that you know, the jets really aren't an issue. There's enough players on the map. There's enough going on that the jets tend to be occupied with other jets. It's really rare
the entire time. Yes,
that the jets actually play a significant factor in the ground game. They'll take out a couple of tanks, maybe. You know, they can be a bit of a pain in the butt, but honestly, they're usually focused on air superiority. It can affect it can turn the tide of the game. But I agree that, you know, that's not always the case, but it takes a pretty damn good pilot for that not to be the case. Now, there are some, as time goes on, there's more and more really good pilots that are able to do that, but you know, it was an annoyance when you had a good jet pilot up there, but I never sort of rage quit the game because of a jet pilot.
Well, the thing is like,
go ahead, Jake.
I was gonna say, like, the line between a good and a bad jet pilot is very, very, like, it's far apart. Like, usually an average pilot will get destroyed by a good pilot. Like, that's the thing that I don't like about jets. It's like, it's not so much that they bother me. Like, I don't want them removed from the game. I don't really think they're a huge factor, but it's like, if you didn't start playing in the jet day one, it's like, you're not gonna have very good luck.
I think Colin said it. I think Colin said the two words that I want to see: air superiority. There should be a game mode called air superiority.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of people wanted this, and with Battlefield 1943, there are obviously people thinking the same thing from that one, you know?
Yeah.
It just reminds me of that level in the campaign, you know, when you're in the jets and all that craziness is going on. I think it'd be a fun game mode, and I think they don't need to tweak a whole lot with the jets to make it fun. I mean, the jets, there's a lot of complexity in flying a jet that a lot of people don't really know about. And I would really like to see what happens when you put 6 jets against 6 jets and just tell them, you know, go at it.
Well, let's talk about those tweaks, because one of the big tweaks that I would like to see, and that I've mentioned multiple times across things, is GeForce. And one of the sort of solutions that me and Level discussed about the idea of jets flying around and around one another is that pilots in Battlefield, now obviously I know that, I mean, some people have said, oh, jets couldn't do that, and I've heard some people say, like, oh, they can, you know, modern jets can easily make those maneuvers. There's no problem with jets stalling there. And I, you know, I'm not an expert. I don't know in terms of how much G-force a jet flying around in a full circle like that, you know, again and again and again. I don't know how much a person could realistically take, whether that's realistic that they could keep endlessly doing that. But anyway, in terms of just game mechanics to stop that kind of thing happening, a quite simple solution we sort of suggested was that they have a G-force mechanic where after a little bit of time your character would just start to black out, and they've already got the mechanic in place because it would just be similar to suppression. Your character starts to lose vision, and perhaps after a while, if they black out, they lose consciousness, and then you lose control of your plane or something like that. I think it would add a real piece of excitement because you would really get that thing of, like we're talking about, a pilot in Battlefield who really is very, very good and knows exactly that line between when they're, you know, when their player is about to black out and not, and someone who doesn't know that would obviously lose their bottle and they'd freak out and fly off straight. He would have the advantage then and be able to take that person down. I mean, do you think that'd be a cool thing to bring in?
That'd be interesting. I mean, like a suppression aspect. I don't know about blacking out. You know,
yeah,
screen goes black and you die. But I think a suppression aspect to where it might be more difficult to track somebody because you've been sitting there circling the whole time.
Yeah, because you're getting G-force, you're sort of
like
being affected by the physics of it. Yeah, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, you do some of the stuff, but again, you know, there's a difference between authenticity and realism, and when you start moving too far into realism.
Well, what tweaks would you like to see?
I would like to see, one, air superiority, and also a jet with 2 people in it.
Yeah, that would be cool. I wish they had this bombing run mechanic still
Oh
in the
no,
game.
yeah,
Like
but man, I don't
maybe
know
the
if you
second
remember
person could do that.
from Battlefield, was it 1942 when
Yes.
you could?
yeah.
Oh man, those people with those bombs were ridiculous.
Yeah, it was 42 and 43 they had that, where you'd go into a little station and then call in a bomb run. That was quite good because it actually gave the fighters a role as well, because you would have to go up and shoot down the bombing planes as they're coming in. So it's kind of a cool little
Right.
sort of feature right there. But yeah.
Yeah, one thing I'd add to this topic is, I think, would we be having this same conversation on including the tank in future BF titles? And I think the answer would be resoundingly no. And I think the reason why is because the tank, if you have a great tanker in there, there's still enough game mechanics in place and balances in place that allow an opposing team with enough people becoming vested in taking that tank out, will take that tank out.
Yeah, nothing's going to stop you. Yeah.
There's a certain allocation of anti-tank resources that will get allocated to that. I think in Battlefield 3 right now, there's probably, when you look at the upper tier of jet pilots and their skill sets, that even if you want to dedicate 8-9 people to a Stinger or an Igla, it's not going to do any difference to it.
No.
And to me, I think that's the big gap, is that there's no if you have one guy who's really terrible at the mobile AA and doesn't know what he's doing, then that enemy jet team, if they're really good, they're going to stay up. And that's sort of a problem, is that hard counter isn't there. And we've seen it go in different directions. In previous patches, the Stinger and Iglo were super effective against the jets, to the point where people weren't even using them that much because they knew that if they got up, one or two AT guys or engineers could take them down. And so maybe it's just tweaking that back and forth so there is a balance. Maybe it's not, oh, you have two different guys shooting Stingers, and if the jet flares, both the Stingers miss. Maybe it's only it disengages one Stinger shot.
Well, I think the biggest problem, you see a lot of the pros, they use the ECM jammer.
Yeah.
And the ECM jammer should not act like a flare.
I love
it
the
defeats
ECM
the purpose. It defeats the purpose of an ECM jammer acting like a flare, balance-wise. Of course, in real life, you throw an ECM jammer out there, of course, it's going to deflect whatever coming at you. But from a balance standpoint, the point of the ECM is that it takes a lock off you. Off of you before they shoot the missile.
I mean, you probably, I don't know, but Merrell, did you ever see my rather long video that I made about the ECM?
Well, that was before. I think they patched it, and there's been some significant improvements to it. The biggest problem with the ECM, or just real quick, is that it comes back in 10 seconds, and it lasts for like 3 or 4.
Yes, that's right, yeah. But I mean, I did make an update after that as well, but it's something that I don't know, I was very interested in it as a piece of equipment just because of its role, and also I was kind of interested in its realistic role. I did loads of sort of looking up about it. But I think one of the biggest things for me with the ECM, regardless of what it should do or what it shouldn't do, my issue with the ECM, and still, is that the way it affected helicopters and the way it affected jets was different. And that was something that annoyed me. Flares work the same on a helicopter as they do on the jets, okay? But the ECM did not. The ECM functioned differently for each system. So my point all along was not, well, it's working for the jets, but it's not working for the helis, or vice versa. My issue was that it should do one thing or the other, and that's what they should have got wrong. And as far as I know, that's still the case. It still will affect if you go into a private server and test the ECM and you see how it reacts to missiles when you fire them sort of before or after it's deployed. If you fire the ECM before, it will break the lock on either system. But when you fire a missile afterwards with jets, and I don't know whether it's to do with their speed or whatever, and I could talk about this endlessly, but basically it's a very different level of reliability between helicopters and jets.
Yeah.
One more thing I'd add to this real quick is you mentioned about what different types of air assets could you put into this, and a few that I'd love to see closed air support aircraft like Super Tucanos or OB-10 Broncos, these sort of propeller-driven closed air support aircraft that are meant to drop small munitions like Hellfires or small diameter bombs or Griffins, Or just give them a bunch of machine guns and have them really good at taking out infantry. I mean, just give me 6 Browning, 50 cals and call it a day.
I think it'd be pretty badass to see a Chinook.
Yeah.
Well,
flying
50
around.
cals in Battlefield 3 are notoriously pretty weak.
And maybe,
so.
and maybe it's not good against in an air-to-air role, and maybe there's still jets in there, and the jets dominate them. But the close-air support aircraft would be a whole lot better.
Yeah.
I love the V-22 example that Jake gave. I think that would be really awesome. I'd love to see some kind of manually piloted shadow UAV, particularly an armed shadow UAV, given that the U.S. Marine Corps is now trying to arm them right now as a modification program.
Yeah.
So maybe, give it 1 or 2 mini missiles that has maybe the blast radius of maybe twice as much of a grenade or something around those lines. It's not a huge, blast, but it still can do some damage. And then finally, maybe even go a little bit goofy in terms of the rotorcraft offerings. In the original Battlefield 2 screenshots, before the game even came out, they had a weaponized Black Hawk as one of the options that you could use in the game. Basically, it was a Black Hawk with a bunch of rocket pods on it. And that was a really cool thing that a lot of people looked forward to, and they took it out of the game, and we never saw it ever again. I'd love to see some of these more armed variants. For instance, in the Vietnam era, there were experiments on putting howitzer cannons on Chinooks. Howitzer cannons, 105 millimeter howitzer cannons on Chinooks, and it'd be this giant helicopter shooting artillery fire.
Well,
I'd love to see that kind of stuff. That'd be really cool.
No.
I think it becomes an issue of balance, though.
Yeah, well, definitely.
Well, yeah, I think they can figure that out.
I mean, a helicopter that I particularly like is a Sikorsky Super Stallion. I really love the helicopter. I just like the look of it, but I like its role as well and everything that it can do. It's such a presence, And I've often thought about that in terms of like what we're saying here, that it's a kind of a larger sort of heli. I mean, it's a transport helicopter essentially, but I mean, it could be used for transporting people, and it could even have a role in. Yeah.
Growler ITV, and you can drive a Growler out of it, or you can paradrop a Growler out of it. That'd be
Exactly.
awesome.
Yeah,
I
that
love
would be
that
kind
idea.
of cool if like they brought in some sort of like mechanic where you could deliver vehicles
Yes,
to point A to
exactly.
point B.
I think
Desert Combat had that 10 years ago nearly. I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I think it'd be feasible for them to do it. It definitely would, and it could be usable on certain maps, which the distances involved were a little bit easier. It certainly wouldn't take any longer than it would to sort of quickly. I mean, often when you're flying a transport heli in Battlefield, you can just lower it down to the ground. Your guys jump off, or you pick them up and you move across. It's a lot quicker than driving, and some of the scale on some of the larger maps. So perhaps it would only make an appearance on the larger maps. But I tell you what else, Merrell, you were saying about how they balance it up if you obviously had like a big heli that had a lot of guns on it.
Different ways that they can incorporate it. Maybe they can just use it where it's not manned. Nobody flies it. Maybe when you go to your next set of objectives, it's by Chinook, and you got to jump in one.
I was going to say,
awesome.
or if the Stallion, for example, if it was equipped with guns and so on, if it was it's like the Pavlo, if it's like a gun mount platform sort of helicopter where it's heavily armored and stuff like that. I like the idea of, okay, what if, for example, it had twice the armor of the current existing helicopters, but with the inclusion of the fact that you could not repair it. How about that? Or that you could only perhaps repair it on the ground or something like that, so it'd fly away or whatever. I don't know. Some kind of change to that, which balanced it up.
When you have something with that much firepower, you got to watch out, because someone's going to find a way to use it in a manner that's just not fair.
Yeah, well, I think you could just sort of say something along the line. Yeah, but I mean, that's what I mean. You'd have to balance it carefully. So you would tweak your weapons to make sure that, for example, the heli couldn't just sit a mile away and fire down, okay? Perhaps it has range issues in terms of its accuracy or something like that. So the idea that it has to come in very low. All right, Daskro's got to hop off now, guys, but we're actually right at the end anyway. So let's tidy up now. Also, anyone wondering why Daskro didn't have a topic today, it's because he hopped in at the last minute here. So next time we do one of these, we'll have some time to prepare a topic there.
Thanks for having me, guys. It was a lot of fun.
All right, take care, mate.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to wrap up now. So thanks for all my guests today. Thanks to Jake in Intheworksmedia. Thank you to DCRU Colin and Sergeant Merrell. This has been the Battlefield Roundtable, and I'm Luetin. I'll see you for some more Battlefield stuff very soon.